Is the Samsung T5 EVO 8TB portable SSD really the right fit for you, or is it something only a handful of power users will ever need? Who should definitely consider dropping the cash on a drive that big, and who would be better off sticking with a smaller, cheaper external HDD, or a cloud backup plan? And, most importantly, does the price make sense for someone who just wants a reliable place to stash games, video projects, and family photos without constantly hunting for space? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first saw the T5 EVO advertised with massive storage in a compact package, I imagined the kind of scenario many of us have run into: a laptop with a 256GB SSD that feels great for the OS and apps. But then you hit the wall when you start pulling in a few hundred gigabytes of raw video footage, or a growing library of Steam games. The idea of a single, plug-and-play brick that could hold 8 terabytes of data was instantly appealing, but I also knew the market is littered with drives that promise space and deliver sluggish performance, or a clunky form factor that ends up sitting in a drawer. I started by looking at what people actually do with an 8 terabytes SSD. The most common real-world use case is as a scratch disk for video editors who need fast access to massive raw files. A 4K project can easily eat up 100 gigabytes or more, and having the ability to pull footage directly off a drive that reads at roughly 460 megabytes per second means you won't be waiting for the timeline to load. Another scenario is gamers who keep entire libraries on an external drive because their internal SSD is already maxed out. In that situation, the T5 EVO can sit next to a console or a gaming laptop, and you can launch most modern titles without a noticeable hitch, especially if you're dealing with games that load assets from disk rather than streaming them over the internet. But the same drive can be a waste of money for a user whose data needs are modest. If your daily workflow revolves around office documents, a few photos, and occasional music, a 1 or 2 terabytes drive already covers the need, and you'll likely never see the advantage of 8 terabytes. In fact, the cost per gigabyte drops dramatically as you go up in capacity, but the upfront price tag climbs steeply. That means you could end up paying a premium for storage you'll never fill, which is the exact risk many reviewers warn about when they see big capacity SSDs being marketed to the average consumer. Let's talk about the practical strengths that actually matter after you plug the thing in. First, the physical size is genuinely pocket-friendly. It's about the size of a small paperback and weighs less than a typical external hard drive, so it slides into a laptop bag without adding bulk. The metal chassis also feels solid enough to survive the occasional bump when you toss it into a backpack. Second, the USB 3.2 Gen 1 interface works with any modern laptop or desktop that has a USB-C port, and with an included USB-C to USB-A cable, you can still use it on older machines. In everyday use, I found the drive to be instantly recognized. No driver installations, no annoying pop-ups, just plug, wait a second, and you're ready to copy files. The read speed claim of up to 460 megabytes per second translates into real-world numbers that are easy to notice. Transferring a 30 gigabytes video file took me about a minute and a half, which is noticeably faster than the 2+ minutes you'd see on a typical USB 3.0 external HDD. For gamers, loading a large open-world title from the SSD shaved off a few seconds on the initial load screen, nothing that feels like a cheat, but enough to keep the experience smooth. The drive also supports hardware encryption, which is a quiet win if you keep sensitive client files on it, because you can enable password protection without needing extra software. On the flip side, there are a couple of practical weaknesses to keep in mind. The write speed isn't highlighted as heavily as the read speed, and in user forums a few people have reported that large file writes can dip into the 300 megabytes per second range. That's still decent, but if you're regularly dumping multi-terabyte video shoots onto the drive, the time saved versus a high-end external SSD with faster writes may be less dramatic. Another trade-off is power consumption. While the drive draws very little power from the host, it still needs a powered USB-C port. On some older laptops, you might notice the drive draining the battery a bit faster than a passive hard drive, which is something to consider if you travel a lot and rely on limited power outlets. Compatibility is another subtle point. The T5 EVO uses a USB-C connector, which is now the standard, but many budget laptops still ship with only USB-A ports. Samsung does include a USB-C to USB-A cable, but that cable is a bit short, so you'll likely need an extra extension if you're working on a desk setup with the cable already reaching your